Hi, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Dave, and we're the IB English guys. We've looked at political cartoons in the past. Today we're going to talk about multi-panel comics. We like multi-panel comics because they tell stories. They're not necessarily a political single-panel cartoon in relation to some current event. These are multi-panel comics that tell stories.
I like the idea, Mr. Jolly. There's a story, there's a clear visual narrative, the language and the characters will support that narrative, and that's what we want to unpack, of course, while looking at the rich symbolism as well. So what do you say we take a stab at a comic from Grant Snider today, Mr. Giles?
Yeah, Grant Snider is an amazing illustrator. He's from Kansas. Shout out to our friend Nathan, the only other person we know from Kansas. But he writes about life. He writes comics that really make the reader kind of reflect on their own lives. And his comics are about mental health and reading and just being a better human.
Yeah, and when we look at this particular cartoon today, if we look at it from afar right now, it's really interesting. It has a clear title. We are sorry to inform you that tomorrow has been delayed. We see the giant word stop waiting, and we see the word today. So at a glance, we already have a sense that, he's giving us a message about kind of how we're living today, and what we should be doing to live a better life today.
Yeah, that's right. And I think we can see clearly what he's doing, and it's got a lot of visual appeal and a lot of fun things to unpack.
What do you say we go ahead and look at that visual narrative? We're going to treat it like a short story, and we're going to be thinking about, the exposition, the inciting incident, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. Let's treat it like a story and unpack the visual narrative.
We like that. And this particular multi-panel comic has a beginning and an end, so it's all kind of a self-contained, story. So we want to think about, first of all, the exposition of a story. The character in this particular comic is waiting. He's waiting for his flight. That's the literal situation, but of course it's metaphorical. Immediately we see that we're talking about life. So we're putting it in an airport setting.
Yeah, obviously the inciting incident, that's the moment of the story that's going to sort of start the action. That's typically where we see some conflict happening. And in this case, the character who is thinking solely about the destination, metaphorically what's happening tomorrow, he's informed that his flight has been delayed. So tomorrow is not coming, or it's coming at a time that cannot be determined. That's his inciting incident. That's the conflict.
Yeah, that's right. And then we have to think about, how is this character going to respond to the delayed flight? How is the character going to respond to just kind of waiting for something to happen in life? We have to look at the comic both literally about waiting for the flight, but also metaphorically what this means about life. This is what we're being invited to do.
Right. And now the extended metaphor continues. We see some rising action, some more complication. We see him, skipping security. We see, the encouragement to discard your baggage. Of course, all of these are rich metaphors in themselves. And we see the notion of the linking to the masses. We know there are lots of masses at the airport. There's that constant waiting. So sort of these are the things that he's encountering on the rising action, hopefully arriving at the climax where a decision will be made.
Yeah, and then that climax is at the end of this comic where he steps out into the world of today. And this is part of both the climax, but also really the resolution, where he is resolving the problem of just waiting, and he's now stepping out into the world of today. That's a little bit of how we might look at this particular comic.
Now, we've sort of unpacked the narrative structure. Now it's time to go into more detail and look at really important aspects of the narrative itself. And I think it's great to always start with thinking about the setting and the context. Mr. Giles, I think in this case, obviously, we've chosen to put our character in an airport. This airport is depicted in a very negative way with really dark gray and sort of empty, diluted coloring. What is Grant Snider saying about this setting?
Yeah, he's connecting, I think all the readers can identify with this idea of an airport, but he's making us think about the airport is just a terminal, it's basically a place where we just transport from one place to another. And this idea of, it's just a place of waiting until you get on that flight.
Yeah, we also see another place in the context, Mr. Giles, outside of the airport, which of course holds all of the waiting and sort of all of the negative aspects that we have to go through to get to tomorrow. How does he depict today in this setting?
Oh, it's this incredible city of today with the horizon and the sunshine.
It's like the Emerald City.
Yeah, it is. No, it is. And it's making us think about this is what life's about. So we've all traveled. Many of us have had flights delayed. We go through security. Flying and travel is maybe not what it used to be. He's connecting to some of those things, and I think that's part of the setting.
Let's talk a little bit about the characters. Of course, characterization is very important for any story. And in this case, I see a couple different things. Of course, I see the main character. He's just sort of a nondescript man with indistinct facial features. I think he's meant to represent sort of the everyday person. Could be male, could be female. The gender's not important, but it's that aspect of waiting and pondering tomorrow that is representing all of us.
That's right. Could be any of us. Yeah. And I think that's interesting. He also illustrates the masses. We see the masses and how they're depicted, and he kind of waiting in line, and he wants to differentiate the man with how has a little bit of color with these sort of gray masses.
Yeah. We also want to think about the objects or the symbols. I think the man in the second panel, we see him sitting with his suitcase. Again, that's his metaphorical baggage that he's carrying around with him, Mr. Giles. I don't think they're necessarily his clothes, his socks, and his shoes. These are sort of the experiences that have happened to him in his life, and that's meant to be, they're the things he carries.
Ooh, nice. We have the airplane, which again, with the airplane in the sky and the sort of like hope for a better tomorrow, that's part of the objects. We also have the security that we go through, and the idea of him like leaving the security. All those things are kind of important.
Yeah, we also see the mass of people, and I think that's important. I think that sort of represents the conformity. You know, is he going to be an individual and continue on his individual journey, or is he going to join that group of masses who are sort of depicted in a really cold and impatient way? And I don't think those people are living their best lives, Mr. Giles.
It looks like almost a scene from like the people waiting in the Great Depression.
We should talk about the sun in the final panel, because that's a stark contrast to that waiting room. What can we say about the symbol of the sun?
The sun is today. It's about living your best life, and it's about that hope and that brightness of actually being in the moment, right?
For sure.
Of that. It's like that inside-outside dichotomy, inside the airport or outside in the sunshine.
It's kind of like that rigid dichotomy that our student Karan talks about, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Giles, let's talk about the style, the artistic style a little bit about this cartoon, and what are some things that you notice? What jumps at you?
Well, first of all, I noticed just the irregular size panels and the sort of playfulness of that. I like that. He's exploring different sizes of panels, and that pops to me.
Yeah, and I also really like his use of coloring in the font, especially the bright yellow words, "Tomorrow has been delayed." I think that's a play of words as, we're sorry to inform you that your flight has been delayed. I mean, it's sort of like the PA coming in over the announcement in the airport, but it's not your flight this time. It's really linking that metaphor together.
Notice that's the gray, right? And we see that sometimes the colors help us to see panels together, like stop waiting, discard your baggage. These are, again, really strong statements, but they really pop out.
And that central, in the composition, the word "stop waiting" in large font, with that imperative command, with even the clock ticking in the corner, those are really clever artistic choices that, in terms of style, if you really communicate the message.
If you looked at the comic from a distance, you would only see "stop waiting."
Yeah.
Which is really the message.
Actually, and you might just see "stop waiting, step out today" from afar, which ultimately is the main message, Mr. Giles. So by making that larger, he's delivered the message from afar and up close.
Yeah, he's illustrating this comic in an abstract way. The way he's abstractly just illustrated this character, all those things are kind of playful and entertaining and part of the comic style that he has.
So what can we say about camera distance? Obviously, there's not a camera, but we do talk about camera distance when we break down visuals like this. So what would you say? It looks like all of these are sort of long shots.
Kind of. Well, we see the long shot with the airplane in the sky, but then sometimes we maybe have to zoom in with the clock that's in the, and we also see zooming in on the character. So we are doing a little bit with sort of camera distance and framing of the panels.
Yeah.
To talk about.
Last thing I want to notice, just thinking about size, if we look at size and scale, the words "today" in that bright, positive pink color, I mean, they're larger than the city, Mr. Giles. It's really accentuating. We want to celebrate today. It's almost it's overpowering and dominating the frame to emphasize his ultimate message of for today. Right?
That's right. I love even the movement of that man through the panels is so interesting.
Let's dive into the language briefly.
Yeah, I like that. First of all, the tone is insistent and almost like he's making the narrator is making a command, right? Saying hey, stop waiting. These are commands. These are
and those are followed up by the command skip, discard, and abandon. Those are strong words that he is guiding us on how to live our best life. We've got the second person you've been sitting wishing things would change, right? So he has the we-you relationship, so he's really connecting and closing that gap between the reader and the creator.
He's juxtaposing the idea of this contrast, the antithesis of waiting, sitting, not doing anything versus like moving, acting, stepping out. That juxtaposition, a lot of like interesting language. Not a lot of language, but it's a lot to talk.
So now that we've kind of broken this down, Mr. Giles, ultimately, what is the main claim that Grant Snider? Can we tie this up into a neat and tidy thesis of some kind?
Yeah, he's using that extended metaphor of the airport, and he wants us to dismiss our fears, stop worrying about the future, stop waiting, and embrace a carpe diem philosophy, and seize the day.
Yeah, Mr. Giles, that is really well said. Folks, in the end, what we really want to show you is that if you treat a multi-panel comic like a story and break down the narrative elements, then of course do some of your close reading and looking at objects and symbols like we always do. If you combine these things together, you can really understand, unpack, interpret, and write about this text type, okay? Come on back for the next video. We'll look at this again and we'll unpack a piece of writing as we move you forward in your journey to master high school English.
Thanks, guys.